Now, it's no surprise that the automotive enthusiast is a pretty finicky bunch. We're a tough crowd to please. However, we live in a day and age where there's a lot of good choices out there, especially if you guys want something that's inexpensive, fun, and rear-wheel drive. Today, in the first Redline comparison test, I'm going to be going over two of the best vehicles on the market. The 2015 Subaru BRZ Series Blue Edition and the very new 2016 Mazda MX-5 Miata. But if you guys have $30,000 to spend, which one is the better one? Let's find out today. So by now you should be pretty familiar with the Subaru BRZ and the FRS twins. These vehicles have been on the market for just over 2 years now, and Subaru hasn't really made any changes to the vehicle. If there's one car you guys have been constantly nagging me to film, it's this car. And I finally got my hands on the car for a week to test, so I'm pretty pleased to be showing it to you. Now, the BRZ has always been a pretty nice car since it came out. I've had a pretty soft spot for the car. I really like the design of it. It's smaller than most traditional sports cars. One thing about the BRZ and FRS is when it first came out, it basically went head-to-head with vehicles like a GTI, a Civic Si, a Ford Mustang, and it really offered something unique. It was a lightweight rear-wheel drive car that had a high-revving flat-4 engine, and we hadn't seen something like this in the States for quite some time. Now, this particular BRZ that I'm showing you is a special edition model. It's called the Series Blue. It's new for 2015. Subaru only made about 1,000 of these. You can only get it in this WR blue exterior color or the pearl white. Now, you can see a couple of things that they've added from the Series Blue. You have this front underbody lip spoiler. It's basically an STI body kit. It goes all around the vehicle. You also have these special 17-inch multi-spoke black wheels. It makes for a nice look around the sides. This vehicle has a pretty aggressive stance. Now, another thing that Subaru did update for 2015 is the suspension. It's got a revised suspension for 2015 versus the 13 and 14 models. We'll get out on the test drive later on and tell you if there's any difference really that I'm seeing. Now, if you want to follow me over to the rear of the vehicle, it's got the traditional, wedge shape of a sports car. It has some nice lines to it. The BRZ comes in two different trims, as I said before. This Series Blue comes in the limited trim. It basically adds this spoiler on the back, the fog lights in the front, and then some upgrades in the interior. You can choose this car between premium or the limited trim, and then the Series Blue, which is actually no longer in production. Now, for 2016, Subaru will be updating this car with just an updated infotainment system and a backup camera, which this 15 lacks. But you can see here it's got these nice looking clear lens taillights with the LEDs, the nice dual exhaust outlets, and overall it's got the classic proportions of a rear drive sports car. So in terms of the looks, the BRZ still has it going for it. Now, coming to the all-new Miata, this is one of the most highly anticipated cars for 2016. And when Mazda first showed us this all-new model last year back in September, I was quite pleased with it. Actually, a lot of enthusiasts were quite pleased with the design. And I have to tell you, seeing it out on the road, the new Miata has a certain presence to it. And it's interesting, the two cars are direct competitors, but compared to the BRZ, this is the one that attracts a lot of stares from people out there. I mean, it has a lot of heritage. This vehicle's been on the market for 26 years, so it's got a lot of people that have had all three generations beforehand, and this new one is certainly very appealing to those who are looking to upgrade from their older Miatas. Now, the design of the car, again, is very striking. Mazda decided to go with a completely different route versus the NC. They decided to bring the car more back to its NA roots. This car is about 4 inches shorter in overall length versus the old NC car, and they've managed to reduce the weight by almost 300 pounds on some models. So this is one of the lightest new cars on the market. In fact, it's so light that it makes the already light BRZ feel like a pretty heavy muscle car, to be honest, at some times, just because of how feathery this new Miata is. Now, you can see at the front, Mazda does come standard with these LED headlights. Now, my particular GT tester does have the swiveling adaptive headlight option with automatic high beams. That's an unheard of feature in a Miata. And one thing you're going to notice about the Miata is it's really tiny. Even compared to how small the BRZ is, the Miata looks even smaller when you park it next to a BRZ. Now, one thing that the designers wanted to stress is they say they designed the lowest hood in the industry. And it really shows when you're sitting behind the wheel. It has a nice low stance, a really low hood to it. Now, if you come around the sides with me, this GT model that I'm showing you guys has the standard dark silver finish 17-inch wheels. They look nice. It's actually one of the nicest factory alloy wheels I've seen on a Miata. Miata. If you guys are probably used to seeing the club model with those 17-inch BBS wheels, that's part of a $3,400 option if you guys want to go for that. Now, if you want to come around to the rear of the vehicle, this is an area where Mazda says they really had a lot of British and European inspiration. Actually, a lot of people who see the car tell me it looks like a mixture of a BMW Z4 and a Z8, or even a Jaguar F-Type. Now, when I first saw this car, I actually thought it looked like a mini F-Type. It's one of the reasons why I decided to purchase this vehicle for myself. You can see here it's got LED taillights. Mazda did decide to go back to a single exhaust outlet with dual tips. That's recalling back the NA generation, and overall I think this car has the classic roadster proportions. It has kind of an aggressive sleekness that the old Miata didn't have, and I think it really works well for this all-new ND. Now, stepping inside the cabin of the BRZ, this is really the area where you're going to notice a huge difference from the Miata. This cabin is downright roomy compared to how cramped the Miata is, which of course is not expected. This is a bigger car, so you're going to have a little bit more practicality. Subaru even gives you some back seats in case you want to try to put some people back there that you don't like. They basically have to have no legs to be able to sit back there. But nevertheless, one thing about this particular tester that I'm showing you, I like the Series Blue model and what it gives you. These blue accents in the seats, the blue stitching, and then the suede Alcantara. It makes for, it brightens up the cabin. You know, after 2 years on the market, there are certain elements of it that are starting to look a little bit dated. But one thing you're also going to notice, it has a red push button start down here with an STI badge. However, don't be fooled by it. There's no actual STI engine. But nevertheless, the BRZ does give you, compared to the FRS, push button start. There's actually a new key fob for 2015. The FRS, you had to get the push button start, you had to go for a special release series 1.0, which isn't available anymore. Otherwise, this is one of the features that the Subaru gives you versus the Scion. So to start the vehicle up, make sure the 6-speed manual is in neutral, put the clutch in, and push the button to start the engine. And of course, it has that traditional boxer growl, and for those of you who like that noise, it's certainly a noise that will please you. Personally, for myself, I prefer the sounds from the inline 4-cylinder engine that's in the Miata, but nonetheless, to each their own. Now, looking at the rest of this interior, a couple things I am also noticing. It's got this new carbon fiber look trim as part of the Series Blue package. The materials are also pretty solid, soft touch here, but overall, I'm seeing more Toyota in here. I mean, Toyota and Subaru kind of had like a 50-50 design influence, where Subaru had more control in the powertrain and the overall design of the exterior, where Toyota had more reign on the interior. This is a Toyota transmission here. There are a couple elements here that are missing. There's no backup camera, again, just like the Miata, which lacks a backup camera, which it is coming for 2016. There are no steering wheel audio controls on the steering wheel. Now, enthusiasts may prefer that because they don't want any buttons here to get in the way while you're driving. Personally, I think that I would prefer the controls for steering wheel for the volume, especially, just because there's already a cruise control stock down here that's a Toyota part. I just think that they could have at least put that there. The turn signals, one thing I noticed is it's not the traditional one click. Usually, a lot of new cars today, if you just tap it, it gives you 3 blinks. Subaru decided not to include that in this vehicle. I'm not entirely sure why. The infotainment system in here is definitely not my favorite. I prefer the Mazda Connect system in the Miata, which is just much easier to use. This, to me, looks a little too aftermarket-y. It's a little bit more complex. The buttons are tiny, especially when you're looking at the buttons on the actual screen. It requires you to take your hands off the road, whereas I prefer just a knob. It's a lot easier to use, especially while you're driving. Overall, I think the cabin of the BRZ is nice, though. The seats are pretty comfortable. They hold you in place. You have a nice view of the road where the hood is nice and low. It's all about that engine because it's mounted so low in the chassis. And overall, for those of you who are driving enthusiasts, you're going to find plenty to like with the interior of the BRZ. Now, stepping inside the cabin of the all-new Miata, this will pretty much wow a lot of folks, especially if they remember the interior of the old NC Miata, which was just filled with a lot of cheap hard plastics. It wasn't really too exciting to look at. Now, this new one, it pretty much looks like it could be in a European luxury stance from certain angles. There's a lot of design influence here, especially from Audi, BMW, Mercedes. There's a command controller here. There's the tablet style screen that sits at the top of the dash there. And to be honest, a lot of you may have been wondering if this screen gets in the way while you're driving. I actually think the screen is mounted right at your eye level, and it's at a good point where you can pretty much focus on the road, but then if you need to shift your eyes, you can just glance at the screen and it doesn't get in your way. Now, the material cabin quality in here has gone way up market. You can see here the GT model that I'm showing you has this leather stitching on the dash with the contrast red piping. It looks very nice. It adds a lot of brightness to the cabin. The door panels, which you're also going to notice, is the fact that there's color matching on the upper portions here. The Club and the GT models are the only trims to give you that. If you guys look at a Sport, a lower trim, it won't have the stitching. It won't have the contrasting stitching on the doors as well. The door panels, there's also a leather stitch down here. The windows, the window controls, the old one was actually over here. Mazda's moved them to the doors. They are only automatic down, though. I kind of wish that they made them auto auto up. The Subaru actually had automatic up and down windows, so that's one feature where Subaru comes out on top. Now, my particular model is the 6-speed manual model. It does have the push button start as standard. However, if you guys want the intelligent access key, you actually have to pay $130 extra to get that. So nevertheless, to start the car up, you have to just put the clutch in and then push the button to start the engine. You can hear the engine actually has somewhat of a little rev up feature when it first starts up. Mazda says that's for emission purposes to kind of get the Cadillac converter up to operating temperature. But you can hear the Miata has a very nice exhaust note. For a stock exhaust, it sounds pretty good. I actually prefer, like I said, the noise of the Miata more than the BRZ, but again, that's really up to your taste. Overall, though, the seats are a lot more comfortable this year. What you'll notice is they use a different foam material here with some lack of wiring in the seats to reduce the weight, and they do hold you in place. I find that the BRZ seats are a little bit wider, so those of you who are taller or of wider frame, you're probably going to prefer the interior of the Miata, where again it's pretty snug compared to the old one. This interior is also a little bit less spacious, although Mazda will tell you it's the same. To me, it feels a little bit less spacious, but really what you're going to notice is just how low the front end of this car is. The hood is unbelievably low, and it has this nice curvature and nice view. And a couple things that Mazda did include is some driver assistance tech. You wouldn't expect it in a Miata, but this one has blind spot monitoring, has lane departure warning, has rain sensing wipers and automatic headlights. I mean, those features were unheard of in a Miata, and now you can get them on this all-new ND. All right, so starting off my drive loop in the 2015 Subaru BRZ, immediately what you're going to notice is the low, stiff suspension in this car. Compared to the Miata, this car definitely feels a little bit more serious. The steering is a little bit heavier for me, and overall the cornering balance of this car, it's got a much stiffer ride. There's less, you could immediately feel the less body roll with the BRZ. If you guys enjoy revving out an engine, if you miss those high revving Honda motors, you're gonna like certain aspects of this BRZ compared to the Miata, for example. I mean, this car has a Redline that's 1,000 RPM higher than the Miata, and you really need to utilize all those extra revs, because this car, even though it has 200 horsepower and 151 pound-feet of torque, those 200 ponies aren't recognized until about 7,400 RPM. So what you're gonna notice is you have to rev the crap out of this motor compared to the Miata. Now, the Miata's engine is also pretty darn good. What you'll notice is the broad torque curve in the Miata. This car has that dead spot that everyone talks about between 4,000 and 5,000 RPM, and you really feel it. This car feels a little bit breathless. It feels like it's almost struggling for air at certain points, and it's gonna be a little bit discerning for some drivers. Especially if you drive the two back to back, you're going to prefer the engine in the Miata just because it feels quicker, it feels lighter. Now, that's not to say the BRZ feels like a pig. Actually, to be honest, this car feels pretty darn light. When I first drove this car, without driving the Miata back to back, I was shocked with how light this car feels. It really, only if you compare it to the Miata, this car will feel like a muscle car, to be honest, from some points of the drive, compared to that lightness and that just overall softness that the Miata offers in the overall driving experience. Now, even though this car feels pretty fast when you're getting on it, expect the 0 to 60 time, as I said before in the full review, around 6.5 seconds. The Miata is about a half second quicker than this car. So yes, the car that has less power is faster, and that's all due to the weight. The BRZ weighs about 500 pounds more than a Miata, and that's a lot of mass. Even though this car is already light by today's standards, the Miata is just unbelievably light, the new one at least. So those of you who want something that's lighter, you're definitely going to prefer the light and toyful feel of the Miata. Again, this is more of a serious sports car. I mean, getting out on the highway, you can feel every bump come in from that stiffer suspension, whereas the Miata's softer springs soak up the bumps better, and it's just an overall easier car to drive if you're going to be driving on rough pavement more, where this car, this car edges me to go faster. I'm really not having fun in this car unless I'm trying to go faster around every corner. And that's where I'm talking about the seriousness comes in. This car is a more serious sports car, whereas the Miata, I'm perfectly content just driving it around at 8/10, obeying the speed limits, because, you guys, I don't really need any more speeding tickets. This car definitely attracts more stares from the police just because of those wheels, the lower stance, that sleek sports car body, whereas the Miata has more of that easygoing personality, and it definitely fits the overall driving dynamics of the cars. Purists will also appreciate the BRZ's tech or lack thereof. Unlike the Miata, the GT that I have, this one doesn't have any sort of driver assistance tech like blind spot monitoring, lane departure warning. It's not going to get there to get in your way, because if you're going to buy this kind of a car, you know exactly how to drive and how to drive fast. One thing about this car is the tail definitely will step out, and if you get super aggressive with it, it'll slide itself out, but it's really easy car to catch. I mean, those tires are not very sticky, and when the rear end does let loose, you pretty much just have to steer in the direction of the spin, and this car will easily straighten itself out. So it's a great car if you guys are first buying your first rear-wheel drive car, just because of that balance. You slice it, the BRZ is definitely a fun ride, and for $30,000 there's not a lot of competition out there that can really offer this much value for money and this much fun. But let's switch into the Miata and see what Mazda's idea is of fun for $30,000. Now, switching from the BRZ to the Miata, you're definitely going to feel just how much lighter this car is. I mean, with 500 pounds of less mass, the Miata is one of the lightest new cars that you can buy, and it's just incredible how much Mazda has actually made this car retain that toy-like feel. And really, there's not a lot of cars on the market that are going to feel like this. The BRZ, for how light it is, it feels like a much bigger, more substantial car. It's still a fun car, but it's a lot more serious. Now, with the Miata, you can basically just tool around town, you can drive it at normal speeds, and you're still going to have a smile on your face. The BRZ can feel a little bit boring, it can feel a little bit lackluster if you're not pushing it hard, and that's one of the main differences. It's kind of why two different audiences or buyers may choose the BRZ versus the Miata. The Miata is a little bit more relaxed. Now, it's really going to come down to what your personal preference is. However, despite the fact that the Miata is more of a relaxed drive, you can still drive the car on your favorite back road like this, and it's still a blast to drive. The steering, however, is not as good as the BRZ's. The BRZ has slightly heavier, more precise steering than the Miata, but that's not to say that Miata's is bad, it's just different. I mean, if you guys remember the last Miata, that had very excellent steering. That was pretty much as good as the BRZ's. However, this one is a little bit lighter, so you're gonna have to get used to that. But, you can still go down your favorite back road like this, and still a lot of fun. Now, one thing about the Miata that's better than the BRZ is the shifter. The BRZ has one of the best Toyota shifters I've actually ever driven. However, it still just doesn't compare to the shifter that the Miata gives you. It's very slick, it's very short throw, and the clutch is also much better. This is just an easier car to drive, especially if you're not really good at driving stick or you're learning how to drive stick. This car is much easier to get right and much easier to be a lot smoother. It's also better at rev matching on your downshifts. The throttle response in this car is just a little bit more precise, a little bit more instant versus the laggier BRZ. And this is what sucks about being on a curvy back road like this, when you get stuck behind a slow-moving car in your roadster. When you put your foot down and drive the Miata hard, you're going to notice just how much quicker it is than the BRZ in terms of feel. Now, regarding the numbers, the Miata is not that much quicker. I mean, 5.8 seconds versus like 6.5 for the BRZ. Yes, the Miata will smoke the BRZ in a straight line, but that's not the point of these two cars. The point of these two cars is just to enjoy the drive. And the Miata offers a slightly different experience. You're going to notice the ride is a little bit more compliant. The softer suspension tuning helps out in your as an overall daily driver. This car rides a lot better over the bumps. It sorts it out much smoother. But you will notice the body lean, of course. That's one of the main differences between the two. The Miata has a lot more body lean versus the BRZ, and you feel it, especially when you turn the wheel, how lightning quick the steering is. You can feel the body transition shift. There's a lot of drama between the weight transfer, and Mazda did that on purpose. They wanted you to feel the sensation of body roll in corners because it amplifies the sensation of speed. The one thing about this car that I noticed is oftentimes I thought I was going a lot faster than I actually was. This car makes 40 miles per hour, for example, feels like you're going 50, 60 miles an hour. So that's kind of a good thing, actually, because I've passed by several cops thinking I was speeding, but I look down at my speedo and I'm actually not going as fast as I thought I was. This car definitely still puts a big smile on your face. The two cars just deliver completely different experiences. So you guys really, it's hard to choose between the two. You guys are looking at both. You really need to test drive both of them and see which one suits you better. I mean, you're going to definitely notice the smaller interior in this car versus the BRZ, but actually I find the seats in this car more comfortable just because the bolsters are less aggressive. It's a much softer feeling seat, and on a long drive I would definitely probably prefer this over the BRZ. Now, regarding interior space, practicality, the BRZ will win hands down, but if you've got room in your life for a toy like this is basically the one to get, in my opinion. So at the end of the day, what we have here are two completely different driving styles. On one side, we've got a traditional rear-wheel drive sport coupe, which is a little bit more serious. It's a little bit more aggressive in the way it drives. It's got a high revving engine with a shift light. On the other hand, we've got a convertible roadster that's a little bit more easygoing. It's a little bit more fun. It's more content at driving legal speeds versus this car where it tries to push you to be a little bit more serious to try to get better track numbers. And if you asked me to pick a winner, personally I'd have to pick the Miata just because I personally like the roadster aspect. I like the fact that I can put the top down. I like its easygoing nature. I like the fact that I've got the wind in my hair while I'm driving. However, the BRZ is not a bad choice as well, and if you guys don't like convertible roadsters, which trust me, I know some people who hate convertibles, you're going to want the BRZ. It's the traditional coupe, it's got more space in the interior, it's got a bigger trunk, and it's a little bit more serious. It handles a little bit better because of that stiffer suspension, which has less body lean versus the Miata. But to be honest, both are great toys, and in this day and age where it's full of boring cars, we as enthusiasts should be very happy that we have a choice between something of a convertible roadster or a more serious sports coupe for under $30,000. But anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed my review of both the 2015 Subaru BRZ and the 2016 Mazda Miata. If you're in the market for something fun in your life and you're looking for a toy car, either one of these is a great pick, but just know personally, I like the Miata more.